All right, we'll get started. So I know we have everybody on a tight time schedule. We don't want to keep anybody waiting. This will be recorded, so we have people who join late. They can always watch the recording. We'll also send it out to all of you who are in attendance. But first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time to join us for our educational session. We have these each month, and our goal, of course, is just to help you to learn more about data analytics, Power BI, JD Edwards, and our QuickLaunch solution. So a couple weeks ago, it really struck me that in our personal lives, just from ages 10 to 80 plus years old, right, we're all accepting and embracing and adopting new innovative technologies that make our lives easier, they make them more efficient, and they help us to save money. It's interesting. We have people of all ages carrying smartphones, little mini computers around so that we can access any and all information in a matter of seconds. We have Alexa and Ring at our households, right, so that everything runs more efficiently and is seamless. But we have smart thermostats that allow us to keep the temperature in our house higher during the day to save money. And yet we can turn the thermostat down while we're driving home from work so that our house is going to be cool and inviting and feel great when we arrive home. So we're so open to embrace technology in our personal lives. And yet sometimes in our corporate lives or in business, we're so slow to adopt, right? Because it's scary. We don't want to step out of our comfort zone. But in today's competitive landscape, organizations also need to quickly adapt to day-to-day business challenges and really stay ahead of quickly shifting and impactful business environments. There's so much going on in the economy, right? The US economy is actually losing more than $100 billion annually due to the lack of data literacy. But there's hope, because adopting data analytics helps your organization to make decisions 5 times faster than you currently are. As a result of all these changes, we see companies transitioning from legacy reporting applications to modern analytics and business intelligence platforms like Power BI. So although Power BI is user-friendly technology, companies still often struggle with how to apply it to their complex data sources like JD Edwards and other sources of data at their company. So in today's session, Adam's going to do a great job of demonstrating how to achieve a single source of truth across all of your data sources corporate-wide. Also at the same time delivering optimum governance, performance, and maintainability. We're also going to demonstrate the power that allowing your employees and leaders to easily access, consume, and digest data is ultimately going to deliver margin and revenue growth, increased operational efficiencies, and strategic innovation. So for those of you who aren't familiar with preferred strategies, we have been an innovator and thought leader in the business intelligence and analytics space for over 20 years. We've recently been honored as one of the top 10 leading Oracle partners to watch in 2022. It's a really exciting year for us. Our QuickLaunch information engine has been proven to deliver really the perfect balance of user-friendly and empowering innovative functionality, near real-time data access, and the IT governance with a single source of truth across all your data sources. So our solution truly is the vehicle that transports organizations like yours to the next level of success. So before I hand it off to Adam, who is our president and founder, I just want to quickly highlight some features of the webinar platform really quick. We want to make sure that we answer the questions that you have, right? We have just a short period of time, but to the right of your screen, you're going to notice that there's a questions part of that small panel on the right. So as soon as you have a question, type that into that questions panel. At the end, we'll do a Q&A section. And of course, then also reach out to you and see if we've answered the question that you had or if you still have further questions. So make sure and submit your questions. If you're thinking it, probably other people are thinking it too. So we'll get that answered for you. And with that, Adam, I'll hand it off to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. The other thing too, just as a reminder, when you do end the session, you will be prompted for a survey, simple 3-question survey. We will be awarding to one of the attendees or responders of the survey a $25 gift card. So make sure you fill that out at the end and just give us some feedback about today. Again, the main focus for today is the title of the session, Modern Data Transformation Analytics Strategies with Power BI for JD Edwards. A lot of what we're going to cover today will apply to other data sources outside of JD Edwards as well. So if there are other areas of interest, I think you'll still find some value into what we're going to talk about today. If you follow Gartner, Gartner comes out every year with what they call the Magic Quadrant, and they analyze, and they've been doing this for well over a decade. On the left-hand side here is the Magic Quadrant from the latest release, came out in March this year. And you can kind of see the goal of this is to be as far up in the upper right-hand quadrant as possible. And there's two axes, completeness of vision and ability to execute. So you can kind of see here Microsoft, and because of Power BI, sitting out here kind of furthest to the right on vision and ability to execute. Tableau and Qlik are also in there. Pretty much these three, there's been a couple others, like ThoughtSpot was up there for 1 or 2 years. But since 2016, it's really been these three products. A lot of these other solutions here have been around for quite some time. You might have heard SAP Business Objects or Oracle, IBM Cognos, and so on. And so there's been a big shift over the years about what really is driving businesses forward with these types of BI platforms. And the emphasis of really what's leading the charge now is more focused around data visualization and self-service, and not the traditional, as I think Jill mentioned, some legacy reporting, just rows and numbers and columns on a page. Things just as more people consider traditional reports or grid reports. It's really kind of moving in the direction of how do we analyze and visualize our data to make sense of it, to be able to make a better decision. I think that's really the goal, and that's what's driving this leaders quadrant now within Power BI. A lot of these other vendors are now shifting in that, so everybody's is providing now an attempt to kind of get a visualization capability within their stack. On the right is just looking for market share. It's hard to find nowadays with all the BI is now just a component of some other larger organizations. So in the past, they all used to be independent companies that were these BI platform providers, and now they're all part of some other company in most cases. So the best I could find was here by Trust Radius from last year, but it does give you an idea of the growth in Power BI. And if you haven't downloaded or used Power BI yet, it's so easy. You just go out there, go online, and go download Power BI Desktop, and we're gonna build some stuff from the desktop today in just a few minutes. But that's kind of why Microsoft's made it so easy for companies to get in and get started with it. What gets a little more complicated is as you then try to strategize of how to use it organization-wide against all your corporate data, and even something like a complex ERP like JD Edwards, and we'll talk about that as we go. So as we all know, everybody's pretty comfortable with a spreadsheet. Some companies are really just trying to figure out better ways to use data in a spreadsheet, and that's good. We actually can show you, and we'll show you today, a little bit about how to leverage the spreadsheet as part of your overall solution. But really the goal is, when you get all of a sudden data dumps in spreadsheets and lots of just these numbers on the page or cells, and you've got VLOOKUPs all over the place. One, it's error prone, but two, it's kind of hard to find what are some of those outliers, right? Which products are our top 10 products in based on margin, or what regions or what sales reps within each region is basically selling the highest margin products, or just selling the most volume of anything. And so really the goal is, I think this is why being able to take that type of data and make sense of it, so very clearly you can start seeing some of those outliers. Like here, top 10 customers, right away I can see a variance year over year to know literally within seconds which customers are our top 10 customers, but also have a declining sales value versus that they were a year before. So things like that, and being able to drill down, which we'll demonstrate as we go through today. But this is, again, it's a new way of thinking, and a lot of companies, unfortunately, it's kind of a little bit scary, and everything new is scary. But but that's kind of the direction that most companies are looking to go. So let's talk about Power BI and how this kind of works when you kind of start from scratch. I mentioned you go out there, download the desktop, basically download the desktop. We're going to go to that in just a minute. And from the desktop, you can really connect to virtually any data source. So there's an API for things in the online like Salesforce. You can go and bring in anything from a CSV or a spreadsheet. So a lot of companies may be using a third-party reporting tool or just a JD Edwards report, export to Excel, and then throw that into the desktop. You might be able to build some SQL queries or connect directly to a database, a data source as well. So it's not just, again, just for JD Edwards, it could be anything. And Microsoft and Power BI is completely agnostic to data. So you should be able to kind of pretty much connect to virtually anything. When you model the, basically you're going to connect to the data, and you're going to model the data and start building calculations. You're basically building some business logic into what's called a data set. Now, it's actually going to be in the Power BI desktop. It grabs the data and allows you to actually build reports within the desktop. When you then publish it to the cloud, which is Power BI service in the cloud, it actually publishes two elements. It separates where it's one desktop, separates the data set component, which is the data model and all the query of the data, and the report as a separate object. And when it does that, what's happening is, in essence, you have to refresh that data set from the cloud. We can talk about how you do that, but in essence, if you basically start modeling data this way, and you basically make a copy of that data set or data model in Power BI desktop and publish it, you're going to get two data sets and two reports, three data sets. So you could not knowingly all of a sudden get this explosion of data sets. And we'll talk about ways to kind of remedy that in just a moment. But the goal would be you come up with a well thought out plan, you build as few data sets as possible, you publish those, and now instead of basically rebuilding things from the desktop and publishing over and over again, you're still going to use the desktop to build reports. So that's an important concept. So you're going to, rather than going and pulling straight from the data sources, you actually start building your reports from the data set that you already deployed. And this is something that, again, not every company realizes as they get going with Power BI, but this is strategically how you want to go about it. You don't want to just build every new report straight from the source, build it from a data set that's already been published and governed and already validated with the data. Okay. So some considerations as you start building out and deploying a solution is you got to keep in mind, again, where's all the business logic residing, right? You want to kind of minimize to get to that governance, single source of truth, and get to that security, making sure everything, gross profits defined one place, not 8 places, not in 8 different data sets. Gross profit means one thing to the organization, regardless if I'm doing a pivot table in Excel or Power BI report or paginating, I want that to return the same value. So you got to think about, where is business logic residing? Is it in the report that was used to export to Excel with additional logic in Excel, but then additional logic applied within the data, the data modeling side? So now you've got also the ability within Power BI, they say, oh, you can connect to a report and add more logic there if you want. And so these are just things as you're trying to manage this and maintain this, who's going to be responsible for that. You also want to be careful of, not loading too much of the exact same data into a variety of different data sets. So if you've got 18 sales data sets that all have the same sales data from, let's say, JD Edwards, right? You don't want to just repeat load all of that every day, every hour of every day, and so on. So you want to be considerate about how much data is moving around. Again, we talked about who's going to manage all of this, and then what's the level of confidence, right? So these are all the things that you want to be looking for as you engage in this type of endeavor. There's a couple things here, again, just re-emphasize the point, less is more. You want to think about that as you're starting to roll out a Power BI solution. On the first here, we got A, B, and C. So again, this is where a lot of companies we see as they just get started, because if I said, okay, download the desktop and start modeling data, most people say, well, I've got the data I want to analyze already in a spreadsheet. Can I just use that as a source? Absolutely, you could. And so what happens very quickly is companies start taking data in the spreadsheet and start building these data sets and reports from that in Power BI. Before you know it, you've got dozens of these Excel-based reports that become, somebody says, oh, I want that every day, and so now who's updating the spreadsheet and loading it in, and then all the points of failure there. So that's one option. What we see is most companies that may start with that, then realize, okay, we need to get more control over this, and so they might say, okay, let's not have 6 different GL spreadsheet driven data sets. Let's create one data set that's automated back from the source of data, right? Let's cut out all the layers of Excel and so on. So we say, like, this might be the next path where you have a GL data set, a sales data set, inventory data set, AR, AP, and so on. So you kind of create a unique data set for each subject area. Now, if I asked, okay, in the case of JD Edwards, how many of these data sets on this, GL, AP, inventory, sales, how many of these have a business unit or branch, right? Virtually every sales data set. So I'm copying the same business unit data, all of these times. And so if I say, okay, I change it and add a new business unit cat code, right? To make a change to that, I might have to make a change to 15 of these different data sets. So this B is still much better than A, but still has some challenges because we're repeating the same data going into these different data sets. So the goal is really to get down to virtually, again, as few data sets as possible. In this case, maybe what if all of those different modules could live in one data set, okay? And so there's a way to do that. We're going to kind of demonstrate some of that today, but this is really, we call it, some people call it maybe the holy grail, right? It's this single source of truth, having one place. It doesn't have to be restricted to JD Edwards. It could be restricted, you could be open to any source of data you want to feed into it. Again, this is all using native technology of Microsoft, and Microsoft's fully agnostic to data. So, what we kind of consider to kind of put a name to some of these different scenarios, A is great for prototyping. If you're brand new and you don't have the luxury of understanding how to model data and make sense of it and translate to cryptic JD Edwards, something like A is a great starting point, right? It's just never something that should really reach production. So, automating is a good step. So when we see companies, most companies that we engage with really are at A when we start with them. We're very impressed when we see a company already at B, and I'm not sure I've actually met a company yet that's actually was already at C, okay? But, there's anybody who's moving in that direction is definitely on the right step. Okay, so let's go ahead and spend a few minutes taking a look at real life examples here. So I'm actually just here in the Power BI desktop. You'll notice here in this desktop that there's nothing in the fields pane. Okay, so if you go up here, you can connect to a spreadsheet, right? If I hit get data, there's all these different options. I can hit more down here. You can see all these online. I mean, anything virtually. There's a way to connect to the data. Or it's JDBC, or there's a OLEDB, or there's just some connectivity. And there's connectors for Power BI exploding all over the, pretty much adding new ones every day. So I'm going to go here and choose analysis services. Okay, oh, actually, before I do that, let's go connect. Before I show against the one data set already built, let's go ahead and look at if you were going to connect to something like JD Edwards from scratch. So I'm going to go choose SQL Server, and I'll put in here SQL demo. Okay, I'm going to import this and choose OK. So now I'm going to connect to a database. Now JD Edwards, again, could be running on SQL Server, could be running on Oracle or DB2. I'm going to go ahead and just grab an example of a JD Edwards database. And as you know, you probably, if you go look at your schemas, probably have things in prod DTA. So let's say that I want to build a trial balance, or maybe my boss has said, can you give me an actual versus budget expense report, break it down by object and how we kind of categorize some of our expenses for each department, something like that. Well, okay, if I'm starting from scratch, I have to know, okay, departments and business units, those are in F0006. Right, you said by account, so I'm gonna have to go grab the chart of accounts. Let's go grab our 901. Do we want just summary balances? Do I want the GL transactions? Not sure yet. Let's just bring in the 902 and 911. And let's say maybe we want to be able to group this maybe and filter by company or something like that. So I'll grab the company as well. So I've selected these objects. I guess I need to know, if I'm starting from scratch, what these actual tables mean from JD Edwards. And if I hit load there, so now it's going to go ahead and start bringing those into this fields pane on the right. So it's going to load the data, and then you're going to see, on the right, those objects in. Now, as I'm modeling this in a data set, if I were to publish this once we're done, once we had it done to the cloud, then you still want to have this being refreshed on some interval, and you can kind of control some of that. So now you can see on the right, let's say I look at the business unit F0006, right? We've got all these aliases, right? So I need to know, okay, what's the business unit, and I can go and rename these if I knew what these were. And then here's like a category code. Well, if I bring in MCRP01 into the canvas, that's the cat code value. But I actually don't want just the value, I want the description. Well, the description's not in that table. I have to go now pull up to the data dictionary to go, pull up the UDC table, and bring back based on the right product code. So there's lots of logic that needs to be applied. If I go in and say, actual versus budget, if we're gonna pull up from the 911, which budgets aren't in the 911, so I need potential actuals from here, but there's also this GLLT, ledger type field, right? So, there's all these things I need to be thinking about, and these are not things that really make sense to have each individual in your company that's going to start trying to do self-service be recreating or rethinking. Like let's not put anybody through that headache or that effort. So I also need to know, if I'm going to go ahead and bring this together, I need to join these data elements together, right? How does my 901 relate to the 911 or 902 or the F0006? So where are all these joins amongst these? So that there's again, now we're getting very deep in the technical, and I'm just doing this to kind of just show that this is the reality if you actually start building from scratch. But this is if you were to download this, and you pretty much could recreate what I just did here in matter of minutes. How making sense of all this is what gets very complicated and takes months or years to accomplish. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up a new Power BI desktop. And now, instead of connecting to raw data, let's connect and say, okay, I already know what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build an expense actual versus budget report. And instead, again, the fields list taking Power BI desktop is still empty. I'm going to choose get data, and I'm going to choose analysis services. And I'm going to go ahead and to connect to this, I need to know we've already published this data set to the Power BI service. And so if I go ahead and just put the name of that link, and there's a way to kind of get that location where that data set lives, you connect live to that and choose OK. First thing it's going to do, it's going to want to authenticate me, and the way it authenticates is using your Active Directory. So you'll sync Active Directory with Power BI, and if we can talk about security, another time as well, because as some people say, oh, I want my business unit Rowe, Rowe security applied, and we can definitely do that. I'm going to authenticate. So now if I select this model, you'll notice this is one data set, right? As if the modeling we were just doing, that's been done. We've organized all that data by general ledger, AP, AR, inventory, job cost, sales, purchasing. So if I want to do an open POs report, I can just grab purchase order, drag supplier, what's open amount, literally in 30 seconds we can get open POs. I don't have to think about how do I bring the item or product information in with the supplier information, with the purchase details. But we wanted to build an actual versus budget expense report. So if I choose general ledger and choose OK, what's happening now is on the right-hand side, you're going to see just the GL elements that are applicable to building kind of an ad hoc or self-service general ledger type report. Now, if I mouse over these objects, we do provide documentation so you can see what the underlying fields and tables and so on from JD Edwards. So if I go up to the business unit, that's the F0006. If I expand that, and go down to like the business unit and description, you can kind of see that aliases, as we provided all of that detail. Same thing with the category code. So if I look down maybe at division, right, this is our business unit cat code 1, product code, 00, and system code 01. So this is documented, but let's go back and start with the account. So this would be like our chart of accounts. And if we look at, let's say like the object account, let's go ahead and bring that in, drag that into the canvas. So now we're going to be able to get, and what's nice about Power BI is you can still build those row-based reports. We can show you how to visualize data in a moment, but especially in finance, you might have a reason to go ahead and just see, let's start with the details by object account. If I go down here to the GL balances detail, now in the GL, you've got like on the 911, there's an amounts and a units field. So 2 values. But to get actual versus budget, I need now to apply a ledger type, right? So then if I wanted then to find something more, we do have basically, about 500 different calculated measures here, like actual amount, inception to date, month to date, quarter to date, year to date, prior period, prior year. So you think about all those different flavors, those income statements and balance sheets and trial balances, all of those calculations are already there and calculating for you amounts and units. We've got, budgets. We've also add some extra like revenue. I have revenue actual versus budget, month to date, quarter to date, year to date, where they apply some additional business logic around, in this case, let's say expenses. So if I were to go, and these would be tailored towards yours, if I just bring in, let's say, year to date actual amount, and I just drag that in the canvas, it's automatically going to go ahead and create my actual amount year to date, but I want to compare that maybe to our budget. So I grab budget amount year to date. Maybe I want to compare that to maybe a variance. So we can go down here and look at the expense variance, actual the prior year, or actual the budget year to date, okay, or year to date percent. So very quickly, we can start building out something. Now, this is just one record for each object account. And we want to be able to get through and maybe see some groupies of that. So one of the things that we do is we work with you on what are those different roll-ups. So how do you break those different income statements and balance sheets and so on. So if I were to go and bring in, let's say, this level 6 above object account, you'll notice that it has another groupings of accounts here. And we can also maybe, instead of having this as just a flattened table, we can turn this into a matrix. Okay, so the matrix, what that does, it's almost like a pivot table where you can actually then start at a higher level and expand, or you can actually expand, this whole table as well, right? So now we can see within employee expenses, sales and marketing expenses, what's that breakdown. We can also maybe want to, think about a spreadsheet. We can duplicate a tab. In this case, let me go and, we have this as a matrix now. I'm going to get rid of maybe budget and variance. And maybe we want to see this by our department, or maybe in this case, maybe by division. So under the business unit, we can go down here to our division and just drag that into our columns. And so now you can start building out these types of, different flavors of these month-end reports. This is still just data tabs and so on. If I were to go ahead and even create a new tab, actually, I want to show you how we can then control that year to date based on a slicer in a moment. But let's just say we want to look at revenue by region. If I just bring in region, right, and then we go down to our GL balances detail and choose our revenue, and we do year to date revenue. And I want to compare that based on our prior year, maybe in this canvas, instead of budget. And I could actually see this visually as well. So if I want to go ahead and pick a stacked bar, we could actually do that as a bar chart just as much. Now I could still go as a user and say, I want to see this show as a table. I could still see the data elements there. But we said year to date, and I could have done this on the other slide as other tab as well. What if I wanted to control year to date, right? Because I don't want that just through today or through the end of this month. I want to be able to control that as a user. So we actually build out a calendar element to this, which is based on your different calendar and fiscal. So if you're a 445 or 544, We've seen them all, we support them all. So I can choose, let's say, year period, turn that into a slicer, and now as a user, I could go in and pick a specific slicer, like let's say 2019 period 8, period 9, you know. You can kind of see it's just going to recalculate. Maybe I want to add to this chart, you know, what is the data label, so we can go and add data labels, turn those on. Again, so it becomes a very interactive and dynamic report that we can go ahead and start, you know, if I want to copy this, Control C, Control V, go over here, and now I want to see this by division instead of region. So we now could go back to our business unit and bring our division above region. And maybe I don't want to see this as a bar chart. Maybe I want to see this as a donut, right? So I want the prior year to maybe be a tooltip in this one, right? So now I can get see my TV, mobile, and we can go ahead and select that, and it'll actually, you can see a highlight. So you can do all this control. You can have it filtered, highlight. Once you're done, you can actually go here and just hit publish. It's going to make me save this report, and then I basically could just save it to the web, and I can log into the web and access the report. Looking at the clock, I want to kind of just show a couple other things before we wrap up. But this is the idea of connecting to the GL. Now, you notice that we had all those other elements there. So if I wanted to go grab maybe another tab here, which is an as of AR aging, or what's my, you know, again, open POs even by supplier here, if I go to the right and choose view hidden, you'll notice that we have all of that other data available. So AP or AR, click on this, we've got aging amounts, as of based on GL date, invoice date, net due date. So all of that data across all of that is there available. I have to know, you know, where things are, and we kind of share with you how to get that knowledge. But, you know, even if I go ahead and just minimize this, you can kind of see what's happening behind the scenes when I connected to that is all those different data elements around JD Edwards that you care about already linked, already synced, already translated, thousands of measures and KPIs already calculated for you. And then this also, you could bring in real life customer examples, you know, a dozen of these could be from even non-JD Edwards data. Some could even be pulling from a spreadsheet. Some could be, so it's, you can mix and match as needed per se. Because I know that we might have some finance folks on the phone, let's talk about a real quick in a minute and a half, if I can pull this off. If I were to go to data, get data from database, I mean, from analysis services, let's go ahead and put in, you know, I'll just connect to a model here. So if I were to grab, let's say from a model, and again, I'm not exporting millions or thousands of records to a spreadsheet, but I can go and select a specific module and hit finish. And now we can do a live pivot table on top of JD Edwards data. So now if we go to the right, very quickly, let's look at our customer. So we've got our maybe our customer name. So Rose. We're going to go up here to our AR. We want an as of aging, so we want to go to our maybe as of based on GL date. It's a true as of. We're going to go back in time in just a moment. I'm going to grab our calendar aging, and actually I'll do an aging band first as our columns. And I'm going to bring our year period. Again, you saw that when we were just over on the finance side. And so now if we go and pick, let's go back to 2017, period 6. Right? It's going to recalculate our as of aging through period 6. Maybe I want to be able to drill down within the customer. What are the different invoices or documents that are still, you know, outstanding? We can go back here to accounts receivable, grab the, you know, any of those elements there, document number, invoice, whatever, and just bring that. So you can go ahead and see exactly the invoices. We can also double click on one of those and get all the details around those. So Excel now becomes just another front-end tool. All the data is still living in that same in-memory data set, okay? So that's the main objective. The last thing I want to show before we turn over to answer some questions as we wrap up is there are, for each of those subject areas, we also deliver some sample reports and KPIs and dashboards. So here's an example of some financial ratios, things like current ratio, AR turns, days receivable, inventory turns. If I see I'm trending red, click on days receivable. Now I can see maybe how I'm trending over the last 12 months compared to the prior year, looking at the different numerator and denominator of the ratio separately. Declining net sales and an increasing AR average is what's basically forcing my days receivables to go the wrong way. The GL, you might have, the different metrics. So these are sample reports mapped over your data as a starting point in each of the different areas. They're all interactive, have drill downs. We still can, I didn't show this before. If I look at, let's say here, I'm over budget 358,000, I can right click on that and drill down. I can drill down maybe from that to the object account, click on a specific object account, maybe drill down to the business unit, or I could even drill through to transactions. So you have all that ability to get down to the GL because we're loading data into the model at that most detailed grain. If you're doing some type of document imaging, click on that and you can kind of get the scanned documents as well. So there's been a lot around the GL today. So, on operations, we didn't really focus on that. But the main thing takeaway is the goal, I think, is you want to figure out how can you get to minimizing the number of data sets, don't have them based on Excel, figure out a way to automate that, and then that's going to provide you the highest level of governance and the highest level of confidence with your management of the different metrics people are analyzing. So again, we're back to the concept of gross profit should be controlled, managed, and the business logic should live one place, and everybody knows that that's already been validated, and that way anything that's coming out of any report from the service of gross profit is going to be accurate. So looking at the clock, I got 2 minutes. This has been recorded, so we'd be happy to share the recording after it's done. But Jill, I'll pass it back. Is there any questions that have come up?
Yeah, there are a couple questions. Great job. It's always so hard to try and fit even just the highest overview into 40 minutes. So first question is, can I connect Power BI to JD Edwards without an Excel export or a data warehouse step?
Yeah, so we didn't go into the details of what we call approaches. We can connect, we call it direct connect. So again, JD Edwards living on Oracle, SQL, or DB2. We layer a suite of views that live right on the transaction data, where in those views we're translating some of those fields that you saw in the logic for category codes. So instead of seeing MCU, it'll say business unit. So we translate the data, and then we model that data inside of within a Power BI data set and deploy that as the source. So that's a direct connect. We have a lot of customers that maybe if your volumes are larger, might want to not do querying against the transaction data, all ongoing. So we can replicate the data to another data repository. We call that an optimized data store that could live in Azure. It could live another data store on premise, but typically SQL managed instance, like a SQL database in Azure. Even if you're going from iSeries or DB2, we can trickle feed that with third-party data replication, and then we load the data set from there. We also have customers now starting to look at things more using Azure data lakes and Delta lakes, and we have a solution for that as well. So there's lots of options. We can follow up with you on that. As far as a data warehouse, most people consider that data set we've built, because it's got all the relationships, it's almost like a star schema data warehouse in memory as a data set. So that kind of negates the need of actually having a true data warehouse step before getting to that. So that's strategically where a lot of customers are seeing value in modeling data that way.
Perfect. This one kind of goes with the first one, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. The question is this pulling directly from JD Edwards tables?
Yeah, so in the direct connect, as I mentioned, it would be views layered right against the table. So those tables are referenced in a suite of database views, and then where the translation occurs, and we're querying those. So it's kind of an indirect, but it is built over the natural schema of JD Edwards as a solution. So we're leveraging, no additional work to be done. We're delivering all of that, and those same views in an ODS basically port over to just a mirrored copy of the transaction JD Edwards data.
Okay. Where do the Power BI data sets reside?
Good question. So as I mentioned, when we publish those, actually within the Power BI service, and we probably don't have time to go into all the details around Power BI licensing, there's a few different ways. There's a Power BI free version, which is just for self-consumption. Once you want to share content and provide self-service across the organization, you kind of have to upgrade to a Pro. Pro has very heavy limitations. So all of our customers now are going with Power BI Premium, which provides bigger data sets and ability to everybody to be able to interact with those. And that can be on a per user basis and a capacity. But either way, when you publish that data set, it's hosted within kind of the Azure cloud, but within the Power BI element of that. So there's not really additional infrastructure that customers need to manage those data sets as they're published into the Power BI service.
Okay, great. What about, here's a question about security. Can you enforce JD Edwards security? And can you restrict certain people from seeing certain modules or information?
Good question. Kind of touch on that very briefly. Yes, you can. Most commonly, it's can you enforce our company security or business unit security? As we load into our model, if that's a requirement, we actually bring in the security tables from JDE. It knows when I'm logged in, I'm authenticated, let's say it's Adam, and I only see companies 1 and 7 or business units 10, 19, and 23. I only get back the data for those that I'm restricted to. And how we actually, if your Active Directory doesn't match JDE, we've got a way to handle all that. But in essence, that's kind of at the data level for Rowe security. Module security, we have those different, you saw when I connected to the model, I saw general ledger. That's called a perspective of the model, sales perspective, AP perspective, and we can actually apply module level security at that level as well. It doesn't pull from like menu security, but we have a whole way with an Active Directory to kind of set that up. So people should only see and be able to return data from modules that they should see based on their JD Edwards or based on what you want them to see coming from JD Edwards as a source.
Okay, and then one final question. How do you handle custom JD Edwards tables?
Yeah, so this is probably something that happens all the time. Very seldomly do we come across a customer that isn't having some level of custom table they want to include. So it really depends upon the type of custom table. Is it typically the JD Edwards F55 tables? Is it replacing the item branch because you've got additional dates on it? Is it a new separate sales that has some other commission information on it? So if it's replacing an out-of-box JD Edwards table, we can swap that out. Sometimes it's augmentation where you want to include it as another object in the model. Either way, we work with you together and partner together to kind of review the requirements, and then we work together to build out the right customization. Whether or not you're doing it or we're helping you on a consulting basis, it's really up to you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for now. I know we ran right up to our timeline, but again, want to thank everybody for attending today. If anybody has any more questions or you'd like to see a deeper demonstration of our solution, have any other situations that you'd like to talk to us about, or just to clearly understand how we can help transform your company, reach out to us, info@preferredstrategies.com, and we'll get right back to you. But thanks so much for your time. And now Adam's going to do his famous drawing.
Well, we're actually, as I mentioned, we're going to do this, fill out the survey, and then we're basically going to pick a randomly pick a winner from the survey results, and we'll notify you of the gift card. So yeah, it's only 3 questions, super simple, should take you no less than 15 seconds. But yeah, we look forward to hopefully seeing you on a future session, and thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much.